Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Jordanian protesters call on government to resign. Syrian demonstrators urge country's tribes to support their uprising. And Saudi activists gear up for Women to Drive campaign. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
News agencies quoted eyewitnesses saying that Syrian forces killed 2 civilians and injured 8 others today when they opened fire on protesters in the Busra al-Harir village in the Horan plains in southern Syria. A number of Syrian cities and towns witnessed demonstrations calling for freedom and the downfall of the regime on this Friday, named the Friday of Tribes.
This is another Friday in Syria. The opposition chose to name it Friday of Tribes. The popular movement spread and its locations expanded, and protesters marched with greater resolve, insisting on their main demand. Residents of Latakia came out to hold a symbolic funeral for the regime to show that a large number of Syrians no longer accept it. The same slogans were raised in more than one Syrian city and town. The outskirts of the capital, Damascus, also witnessed a popular movement. Protests and demonstrations were held in the center of the city and its suburbs. The numbers of participants in these protests varied, but they were united under the same demands and slogans. In Daraa, the tension on the streets is high amid the tireless voices calling for freedom and the response by Syrian security forces with bullets. The scene is the same in Al-Kamishli. Eyewitnesses say that at least 3,000 people carried slogans condemning the military operations launched by the Syrian army in Jazeera al-Shuhur. In Aleppo, dozens marched to Da'iria Street and rallied under the watch of security forces. Tension is also running high in the Homs region. Eyewitnesses said that the city is living a real war.
President of the International Red Cross, Jacob Kellenberger, called on the Syrian authorities to allow his organization to immediately enter the regions witnessing acts of violence. He expressed that he was personally ready to go to Syria to meet with government representatives. The president of the International Red Cross reiterated his request to meet with all detainees in order to evaluate the conditions of their detention and the treatment that they have received in Syria. In Ankara, Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan accused the Syrian regime of committing what he referred to as atrocities and of behaving inhumanely towards protesters. Erdogan said in an interview with a Turkish TV channel that if these practices continue, his country will find it difficult to defend Damascus in the international forums.
Hakikaten can havliyle oradan kaçarak Türkiye'ye sığınmak isteyenler için
في الحقيقة لا يمكننا إغلاق أبوابنا أمام الفارين للنجاة بأرواحهم من سوريا.
In fact, we cannot close our doors to the survivors who fled Syria, but I don't know how long the situation will last. I talked to Bashar al-Assad and explained to him all these matters in all honesty. But despite all this, it seems that they underestimate the situation and told us that things are completely different from what we see. Bashar al-Assad's brother Maher is not behaving humanely, and atrocities are being committed in Syria right now. They take horrific pictures of women whom they kill. Such pictures and scenes cannot be accepted or overlooked in any way. And such scenes will certainly be a subject for discussion at the UN Security Council. Now, we cannot defend Syria at the Security Council because of these matters.
In this context, Turkish security forces prevented pro-Syrian regime protesters from attacking opposition opposition protesters, rallying in front of the Syrian embassy in Ankara. A number of supporters of the Syrian president coming from outside Turkey attempted to attack dozens of Syrian protesters residing in Turkey and their Turkish supporters. The security forces prevented the attack and separated the two protests. The two protests continue in a tense atmosphere in front of the Syrian embassy, which has adopted heightened security measures. The opposition protesters chanted slogans demanding the toppling of the Syrian regime and to stop what they referred to as massacres committed against the Syrian civilians. Pro-regime protesters chanted slogans supporting President Assad and condemned what they called a conspiracy targeting the stability of their country.
انتقالا إلى الشأن اليمني تواصلت التظاهرات المعارضة والموالية للرئيس اليمني.
Pro and anti-Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh protests continued today in Sana'a and in a number of cities. This comes 1 week after Saleh was wounded in an attack on a mosque adjacent to the presidential building, in which he was a target. While supporters of Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh confirmed he would soon return to the country, opposition protesters demanded the formation of a transitional council as a temporary alternative to Saleh's regime. This comes amid tension and confrontations between the Yemeni army and Islamic extremists who seized the provincial capital on May 29th.
ينضم إلينا عبر الهاتف من صنعاء طارق الشامي.
Joining us over the phone from Sana'a is Tariq Shami, head of the media department of the ruling General People's Congress Party. Welcome, Mr. Tariq. A number of sources confirmed that the number of supporters of Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh who came out today was very small in comparison to the marches we were accustomed to seeing when the president was in the country.
On the contrary, we were surprised by the large number of people, which exceeded the highest number of the last 3 weeks. There was a massive amount of people, and I hope you follow the broadcast coverage on the Yemeni media networks, such as Yemeni television. In fact, there was a large number of people. We were surprised by the huge enthusiasm of the people who flocked to Sabine Square, the provinces of Ib, and across all provinces. In turn, the real picture is of the people's rejection of this incident. Until now, this incident remains a shock for us, all the Yemeni people. I don't believe that anyone who loves their country would back such an aggression against the president of the country and the heads of the constitutional and legislative institutions.
Excuse me, Mr. Tariq Shami, but President Ali Abdullah Saleh no longer represents a popular consensus. For 4 months, Yemenis have been taking to the street en masse to demand the resignation of President Ali Abdullah Saleh. The matter escalated into the incident that occurred, the attack that took place in the presidential palace's mosque. So is President Ali Abdullah Saleh the only one capable of leading Yemen? Why isn't a compromise reached that would satisfy all parties? At the end of the day, we're talking about Yemen, a country, and not a person.
Yes, but I would like to clarify the situation in that the incident that occurred turned the tables on all those planning and conspiring against the regime. Right now, there is a popular rejection of such demands. What happened overrides everything that was previously proposed. Choosing killing to attain power is unacceptable. As for an agreement, I would like to say Yemen has a democratic constitution, and this democratic constitution is the one that dictates how one reaches power and the peaceful transfer of power. So any attempt to overthrow the constitution and any attempt to reach power undemocratically will lead Yemen to ruin and instability.
In Bahrain, authorities have arrested 10 people as anti-regime protests heat up in towns and villages around the capital. Bahrainis have come out in large numbers after Friday prayers across the Persian Gulf Sheikhdom. They've again been calling for an end to the rule of the Al Khalifa family. But Saudi-backed regime forces have already stormed the village of Karbabad, detaining several anti-regime protesters. Protesters have been taking to the streets since the start of the popular revolution back in February. Since then, the Manama regime has killed dozens of people and detained over 1,300 protesters. During a Friday prayer sermon, the country's most senior cleric said there is no chance of talks with the regime for as long as the crackdown on pro-democracy protesters continues. Now, Jordanians have once again taken to the streets after Friday prayers in several cities to demand the resignation of the government and an end to ties with Israel. Protesters in the capital Amman, Tafila, Karak and Thiban accused Prime Minister Maruf Bakhit's government of failing to fight corruption. They also voiced their anger at the government for its lack of motivation to implement political reforms and called for the dissolution of the lower house of parliament. In Amman, protesters gathered in front of the State Security Court building after Friday prayers. They called for the closure of the military tribunal, claiming it restricts people's freedom. They also demanded the release of a Jordanian soldier who's serving life in prison for shooting 7 Israelis dead in 1997. Now, the outgoing U.S. Defense Secretary has said the war in Libya has exposed critical shortcomings in NATO's capabilities.
While every alliance member voted for the Libya mission, less than half have participated at all, and fewer than a third have been willing to participate in the strike mission. In the past, I've worried openly about NATO turning into a two-tiered alliance between members who specialize in soft humanitarian development, peacekeeping, and talking missions, and those conducting the hard combat missions. This is no longer a hypothetical worry. We are there today, and it is unacceptable.
Speaking at the Security and Defence Agenda think tank in Brussels, Robert Gates also said many NATO members are running out of munitions only 11 weeks into the war in Libya. Gates criticised European governments for shrinking their country's defence budgets and threatened the alliance with reduction of US contributions. Gates, who will retire at the end of this month, also said the military alliance has struggled at times to sustain deployment of 24,000 to 45,000 troops in Afghanistan. Gates said the US share of NATO defence spending stands at 75%. This comes amid reports that the cost of the US military operations in Libya has already exceeded the Pentagon's estimates.
As the war in Libya rages on, reports of the true cost of it are starting to come in. The U.S. military has already spent hundreds of millions of dollars more than the Pentagon's estimations. A Pentagon memo has put the cost of the U.S. operations until mid-May at around $700 million. The U.S. has about 75 aircraft, including drones, involved in the operations against forces loyal to Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi. The pace of spending is higher than reported by the U.S. Defense Department in late March. Pentagon officials told a congressional hearing that the U.S. had spent about $550 million in Libya at a rate of about $40 million a month.
Libyan state-run TV said NATO warplanes raided military and civilian sites in the town of Zawara, west of the capital, Tripoli. Media sources indicated hearing explosions in Tripoli last night. Politically, Senegalese President Abdullah Wade met with the leaders of the Libyan opposition in the city of Benghazi. The two sides looked into a number of proposals that included discussing and activating mechanisms for Libya to rely on after Muammar al-Gaddafi's departure.
NATO air raids on the capital Tripoli have become a familiar scene since direct military intervention began in Libya. Media sources confirm that loud explosions were heard in Tripoli after NATO shelled a number of sites in the city at night. In addition to Tripoli, Libyan television said NATO warplanes raided military and civilian sites in the town of Zawara, west of the capital. For their part, Gaddafi's forces shelled a number of cities where the opposition is entrenched. According to opposition sources, the area of Al-Jabal al-Gharbi and the city of Zintan were targeted by Grad missiles. These sources said the towns of Yafran and Nalut were also subjected to heavy shelling by Gaddafi's forces, which are massed near the Tunisian border in an attempt to retake control of the Wazin crossing. Alongside the military campaign, swift political action is being taken to find a solution to the situation in Libya.
الرئيس السنغالي عبد الله واد في مدينة بنغازي.
Senegalese President Abdullah Wade met with leaders of the Libyan opposition in the city of Benghazi, the opposition's stronghold. It is the first time a foreign head of state has visited Benghazi since the beginning of the revolution against the regime of Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi in February. The Senegalese president went to Benghazi on a private visit in order to offer a number of proposals on the political situation in the country.
These proposals are represented by holding a conference in Dakar or in any other African state, propose, discuss, and activate the mechanism that Libya will rely on after the departure of Muammar al-Gaddafi.
ويبدو أن الحديث عن ليبيا بعد القذافي أصبح من المسلمات.
It seems as though talks about a post-Gaddafi Libya are included in one of the Senegalese president's proposals, in line with other international calls to find a solution to end the crisis in the country.
I look at you in the eyes and call on you to declare a ceasefire and relinquish power. It is in your own interest and the interest of all Libyan people that you leave power in Libya and never dream of coming back to power.
Wade's visit comes at the same time as the Libya Contact Group's third meeting, held in the Emirati capital, Abu Dhabi. During the meeting, it was agreed to provide the opposition financial aid in the sum of $1.1 billion. The meeting concluded that the quick military solution had failed in Libya.
On the first Friday, following the 100 days set by Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki to implement reforms, hundreds of Iraqis held protest rallies in Baghdad and other southern cities demanding better services. Despite the strict security measures enforced by the government of Baghdad, hundreds of protesters gathered in Tahrir Square in the center of the Iraqi capital. Clashes erupted between the protesters on one side and tribesmen loyal to the government on the other.
العراق سيطلب الإبقاء على قوات أمريكية. هذا ما أعلنه ليون بانيتا المرشح لتولي منصب وزير.
Meanwhile, Leon Panetta, a leading U.S. candidate for Secretary of Defense, said that Iraq will likely ask the U.S. to keep some of its troops in the country. Panetta said that the request would be forthcoming at some point, and that the U.S. should agree once the request is made. The outgoing CIA chief told the Senate Armed Services Committee that the situation remains fragile, which requires them to take measures to ensure that the gains they have made in Iraq are sustained.
He says 3,000 to 5,000 makes sense when it comes.
First IBA and now Kordofan. Kordofan is yet another hub for growing tension between Sudan's north and south. Despite the diplomatic efforts aimed at quelling the raging war between the two sides, renewed clashes erupted in the city of Kadugli, the capital of the southern Kordofan state, as well as other areas. Fierce confrontations ensued between government-backed forces and members of the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, SPLM. Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir said that the situation is under the control of the Sudanese army, which is now clearing the state from what he referred to as remnants of the rebels. Sami al-Shnawi reports from Khartoum.
Tension is running high in the state of southern Kordofan, following the clashes that erupted between the Sudanese army and the Popular Army, loyal to the government of southern Sudan. Military sources said that a large number of people have been killed or injured. The new conflict came at a time when the ruling National Congress Party was meeting with the SPLM in a bid to defuse tension. As soon as the meeting ended, gunfire erupted targeting the governor's headquarters.
We call on the SPLM leaders to take a clear position on this issue. If it was an isolated incident instigated by the local leadership in the state, the supreme leadership of the SPLM needs to adopt a clear position on this issue.
The armed conflict of southern Kordofan has caused fear among residents, forcing many of them to flee the war-torn region. The UN announced that it has not received authorization from the government of Khartoum, allowing the deployment of its forces in the region.
The UN forces don't have any authorization. Therefore, they can't enforce a ceasefire. The UN will continue its mediation efforts between the two sides in a bid to broker an immediate ceasefire.
The southern Kordofan region was listed as a special status territory as cited by the Nafasha Agreement. However, the volatile situation there seems to be drawing the region closer to the brink of a full-fledged war. Meanwhile, the ruling National Congress Party called on the SPLM to distance distance itself from the southern Kordofan forces. After the breaking out of war on the borders between the north and the south, the Sudanese governing partners are set to meet again in a bid to defuse the crisis. However, disagreements seem to be the dominant factor of every meeting they hold, and in the absence of a solution, they will likely adjourn the next meeting at the sounds of gunfire.
Syria is now under fire for its failure to allow UN inspectors to investigate its alleged nuclear weapons program. Now the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN's nuclear watchdog, has decided to refer Syria to the UN Security Council. The trump card is Russia, which has threatened to veto any resolution. IBA's Ellie Wogelanter has more.
The UN nuclear watchdog voted yesterday to report Syria to the UN Security Council over allegations that it built an undeclared nuclear reactor. The vote by the IAEA's Board of Governors came after Glyn Davies, the U.S. ambassador to the IAEA, presented a new U.S. assessment showing Syria's intent to produce plutonium for military purposes at the reactor, which was destroyed by Israel before construction was completed in 2007.
Syria's apparent attempt at constructing a secret, undeclared plutonium production reactor, a reactor with no credible peaceful purpose, represents one of the most serious safeguards violations possible. The resolution is a necessary and appropriate step in light of the troubling findings in the IAEA's latest report, including Syria's demonstrated refusal for the past 3 years to cooperate with the investigation and allow investigators access to all sites and information requested by the agency.
The move by the International Atomic Energy Agency comes amid political protests in Syria. But Washington and its allies insist the timing of the recommendation has nothing to do with the crackdown on pro-democracy protesters and is separate from an effort by European nations to have the Security Council condemn Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime. It remains unclear what action the Security Council would take against Syria. Russia has announced that it will oppose a draft resolution.
We cannot agree with the suggested draft resolution. We gave suggestions how to improve it. Unfortunately, they were not met. That is why, if it is put to vote, we will vote against it.
But the recommendation naturally has the full support of Israel.
I think it's a very good one. I think it's also a clear, sends a clear signal to other countries as well that in the case of non-cooperation, the agency is fully eligible to draw a conclusion based on its own information and analysis. So we are really hoping that to see the next case.
The White House said the IAEA decision marks a significant action by the international community to uphold the non-proliferation rules of the road.
What is it that Syria needs to do now? Well, in the view of the United States, the only way that Syria can demonstrate that it has come back into full compliance is by cooperating with the IAEA and providing the necessary information and access. The most efficient way for them to do that would be to make a new declaration.
Syria lobbied hard to prevent the vote, in which 17 members of the 35-member board voted in favor of the referral. 6 nations, including Russia and China, voted against it, 11 nations abstained, and 1 member was absent from the vote. Ellie Wogelanter, IBA News.
Saudi women are forbidden to drive cars in the kingdom, but Captain Hanadi Hindi is a Saudi woman who flies an airplane for Prince Al-Walid bin Talal bin Abdulaziz's company.
This is an engine that has been turned on during the Arab Spring to defy the regime's rule of forbidding Saudi women to drive. We don't know what tradition, religion, or law this rule was based on. In Saudi Arabia, Saudi women are preparing for this coming June 17th, when a massive number of Saudi women will be driving their cars in the streets of the kingdom to support Manal Sharif.
التي نشرت صورا لها على موقع يوتيوب وهي تقود سيارة.
A video of Manal driving her car was uploaded to YouTube, after which she was detained under allegations of violating Saudi law, standing against the kingdom's regime, and inciting public opinion. Because Manal Sharif is not the only one who rejects this law, a call was sent out to organize a national protest on June 17th. It may be an appropriate time for Saudi women to engage in this battle. They will not demand the toppling of the regime, but to break the chains imposed on them.
ولكن بإسقاط القيود المفروضة عليها.
The regime built the largest women's university in the world and prevented any mixing of genders within it.
وسبق أن تمنت الأميرة عادلة ابنة العاهل.
Princess Adila, the daughter of the Saudi king Abdullah, has previously expressed her wish that women be permitted to drive. She said, "I wish we would overcome the issue of banning Saudi women from driving cars, but the matter is not in my hands." It is not yet known whether Princess Adila will take part in the June 17th campaign or not.
المرأة السعودية ممنوعة من قيادة السيارة. ولكن ماذا عن امرأة؟
Saudi women are forbidden to drive cars, but what about this woman who flies airplanes? At 25 years old, Captain Hanadi Hindi is a woman who has gained the trust of a Saudi millionaire, Prince Walid bin Talal. He designated her to be the pilot of his private jet, which was unprecedented in Saudi Arabia.
وكانت شركة المملكة القابضة التي يترأس الأمير الوليد.
Prince Walid bin Talal heads the Kingdom Holding Company's board of directors. The company has signed a contract with Hindi, the first Saudi woman to obtain a pilot's license.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs, programs which connect you to the world.